Welcome to the final section of the Discipleship Field Guide. One of the recurring themes throughout the field guide has been this live, die, give triangle, this call to the three decisions of a daily disciple, that every day we must live for Christ, die to self, and give our lives in service to others. But this grid is not just a grid for what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, it's also the very grid we need to know how to go and make disciples of Jesus. Jesus' call to us with his final words before he ascended back to heaven was to go and make disciples of all nations. And when we hear that, the tendency is to think, I'm not ready. I can't do it. And that's why we first have to choose to live for Christ. We're not living based on how we feel. We're living out of obedience for Jesus. This call is not dependent on us. It is dependent on our faith and trust in Jesus. We must live for Christ. We must live certain that he has promised us this power, this gift of the Holy Spirit, that he will not leave us or forsake us, but he will instead equip us and embolden us to go and do the very thing that he's called us to do. It is a decision of faith to live for him. See, here's the thing. My life is now wrapped up in the life of Christ. It's wrapped up in this desire to live and follow and obey him. And if our lives are truly wrapped up in his, then we best ought be found doing the very thing that he's called us to do. But with this, then, we must also make the decision to die to self. You see, when we think of going and making disciples, all kinds of excuses come to mind. I don't have time. I'm not ready. I'm not equipped. I don't know enough. I'm not smart enough. I need to know and memorize more. We compare ourselves to others. And this is why we must die to self. Because this call is not dependent on us. This call is promised and empowered by the Holy Spirit. And so we must lay our insecurities, lay our inadequacies aside, and instead live for him. The enemy would love nothing more than for us to focus on our inadequacies, on the things that we feel we cannot do. But we must die to the flesh and keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, trusting that he will empower us to this thing that he has called us to do. Paul says in 2 Timothy chapter 2, writing to Timothy, that what you've heard from me entrust now to faithful men. But then he goes on from there, and he says that no soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but instead is eager to please his commanding officer. This should be our desire then. We die to the civilian affairs of life, eager to live for Christ and do what he's called us to do. But last and not least, we must give ourselves in service to others. And this really is the heart of disciple making. Paul writes in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 to the Thessalonians, saying, I have love for you and I desire for you. And it was this desire then that led us to give you not just the gospel, but our very selves, to give you our very lives. This is what disciple making is, to give of your time, to give of your very life and your experience, to give of your perspective, to give of your example and what it looks like to meet with Jesus, what it looks like to bring Jesus into every part of your life, your marriage, your parenting. We must give these things to others so that they have a snapshot and a picture of what it looks like for them to follow Christ every single day as we seek to follow Christ. See, at the end of the day, this is the picture of disciple making and what's required to go and make disciples. It's easy to aspire to leading or teaching in these great public settings. But what Jesus modeled with his life, and then what Jesus commanded us to do with our lives, is to go and make disciples, to invest our lives in the few. And we will consistently talk ourselves out of this or convince ourselves that we're not able unless every day we make this decision that we will live for him and trust that he's called us to it. And trust that he will empower us to it. And die to our insecurities and our inadequacies and give ourselves fully to others. And so, therefore, go. and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that He has commanded us. And as you go knowing the promise that He will go with you. He has empowered you. He has empowered you to do this thing that He has called us to do.